From the center of the galaxy, this is ForceCenter, a show about Star Wars pop culture and the ultimate adventure, life itself. Me, ho, I'm Kenneth.
Me ho ho, I'm Joseph Scrimshaw. I like that this holiday version of our greeting. Oh ho ho ho.
Look, we're recording on a Tuesday, which is our news has normally been Monday, and I was out late at a drag show birthday party. Happy Pride Month to everyone who celebrates. But when you get home at 3 a.m. and you still got glitter on you, Joseph, Star Wars news is you gotta get your energy up.
That's right. I went to bed at 10 p.m. after yesterday. My day suddenly changed on me, so I had to skip lunch, and then I had to wait somewhere in Burbank for my wife to pick me up. So I said, I'm going to the Blue Room, the cocktail bar that opens at 10 a.m. and has a vibe that this cocktail bar opens at 10 a.m.
Correct.
So I had a martini and fell asleep. Not at the bar, but anyway. I'm glad that you were full of glitter. We should all be full of glitter.
We should all be full of glitter. Yeah, not to get too far into Californian stuff, but the Blue Room in Burbank, California, it's like a Vegas bar 15 blocks off the strip.
Yes.
At 10 in the morning.
Yes. It's so beautiful. More rooms should just be blue, and the server's so friendly. Anyway, big fan.
That's part of our journey here. Before we get to everything we're talking about today, I want to let you know today's podcast is always brought to you by our merch shop on Fourth Wall, and you can check out our merch store there. Pick up a T-shirt, a pint glass coaster, something to help support the show and represent ForceCenter out in the galaxy or in your own den. If you get a coaster or a pint glass. We are at forcecenter-shop.fourthwall.com, forcecenter-shop.fourthwall.com. Links down below if you're watching on YouTube. We still have an active TeePublic shop. I think we got a $1 sale deposited into our funds recently.
Wow.
So, hey, all right there. So that's that, but also we are still moving towards a new Patreon goal.
That is right. We were very, very delighted to reach our goal of getting 407 paid patrons by the time of the release of The Mandalorian and Grogu. So now we're building to 415. We haven't discussed a time frame for the goal to get to 415 paid patrons, but I think at least by the time Mando and Grogu comes out on Disney Plus, I think maybe even sooner.
Yeah. Well, we can do that. Yeah, we can do that. We'll
find a better benchmark. The point is, thank you so much for everybody who has been joining in on the Patreon. Obviously, financially challenging time for lots of folks, and this is helping us a ton to be able to keep doing this. And we are really happy to be able to meet more people in the community. And join Patreon, you get access to Discord, where you can discuss Star Wars in a friendly and I think safe environment. And then you can send in questions and calls, so you get to be a part of the community, and we get to know you a little bit better.
Yeah, a lot of fun over there. Thanks to everyone who called on our recent Mando and Grogu reaction shows. We'll probably keep taking some of those calls going forward, too. We'd like to always catch up, you and I, talking about the life adventures, Star Wars adventures. Well, this is that time. I was up having glitter. That's why I'm a little discombobulated, but having glitter all over me. But anyways, Star Wars life adventures, sir.
Yeah. Tired and frazzled because it's a crunch time for some various film work. But I think the fun Star Wars adventure in my life is my wife and I finished our rewatch of the third season of Mandalorian and just enjoyed it very, very much. I enjoyed it when it was on, and it was fun to rewatch the episodes and kind of remember the themes that we talked about and the things that the details we got excited about. So I was never in a point of I don't like season 3 of The Mandalorian at all. Because I also recall, I think it overlapped with Bad Batch, and it definitely overlapped with Star Wars Celebration. And I remember feeling like, man, I would like to be able to savor this, but I feel like I'm running to keep up with Mandalorian Season 3. And then when I talked to several of my more casual Star Wars friends, they were so negative on Season 3. And the thing that they kept saying was, hey, we love season 1 because we didn't need to know anything, and we were just hooked in on this story of scary armor man adopts most adorable baby in the galaxy. And then we were okay on season 2, but maybe it had a few too many Star Wars things thrown in. And then this what is this about? Why am I watching a bunch of helmet people retake their planet? And I thought Din was supposed to have one quest per season, and he didn't. And getting to step back and just rewatch season 3 for myself, it really made me think about the thing that we talk about all the time of I dream of a day when more of us can watch the art that the creators created rather than the art that we wanted it to be. And that, again, it's not about liking or disliking.
Mm-hmm.
But I think if you're watching season 3 and go like, I want it to be more of season 1, that's valid, but that is not what the creators made. And what the creators made is a really clear story of we need to heal our wounds and not be dragged back into the past and choose to step forward into the future and come together to reclaim our own heritage, our shared heritage. And it's not subtle.
No.
But yeah, anyway. So that was my kind of Star Wars adventure, both the real joy of just rewatching it and enjoying it and seeing how incredibly cinematic and well executed it is. And, seeing like, yep, it's different. It's a different season with very different goals, but those goals are clear and quite good, I think, if you let them into your heart.
Yes. Yeah, we are so much aligned on season 3, and I just completed my rewatch, getting ready for the movie, and actually completed it right after I'd seen the movie. And I right there with you. We've I think I hate to use the word defend, but that's kind of what it comes down to sometimes. We've defended season 3 here, and I still do, and I still love it. And I watched it and thought, okay, I see some of the stuff that might rub up against stuff in terms of like maybe a little weird acting performance, or this kind of episode goes this direction. I get it. I can have those conversations with people, but I'm with you. There's some just really powerful statements and themes in there. It is really political at times, and I think a very clear-cut, concise way, and in a very Johnny Favs way. And it's also just got some. It's a Star Wars show to me. Like Mandalorian and Grogu season 1 and 2 are as well in their own ways, but this is like almost what you would imagine. And I don't want to fight with people on it anymore, but I'm with you.
Yeah. And some very quickly, because I'm excited to talk about the news. Also a little bit of a mea culpa that I think sometimes for us all in Star Wars fans, we get so excited that we start to craft narratives in our head. And I certainly talked a ton during our coverage about how the Armor is a cult leader and heading to this big conflict between her and Bo-Katan or her and Din. And like the story that Johnny Favs wanted to tell was simpler than that. The Armor is a rigid cult leader who is like, I'm going to get my whole society killed unless I bend and say, everybody, it's okay that we have differences. Let's focus on what we have in common. In that scene where she tells Bo-Katan to take her helmet off and like be the version of a Mandalorian that you want to be because you walk in both worlds and we need that to actually be together. I think because we all talked about it a lot, I talked about it a lot, it felt like, oh, is that it? But that's on me that I built up an expectation. And instead, Johnny Favs wanted to say, hey, look, a bleeping cult leader made a better decision.
Yep. We've had, and I get it, some folks have some serious religious trauma. I think John does as well, and it comes up a lot. And yeah, I'm with you. Yeah, we have such wonderful discussions here. Sometimes you go, I went into the Mandalorian Grogu movie season going, I can't wait till Jar Jar Binks shows up. And I had to remind myself that's something you have all hoped for vibrantly and vividly, but it's not necessarily going to happen.
Yes.
I'm with you.
Yeah. Anyway. Enjoyed it is the point. Hey, I enjoyed Star Wars. Weird
thing indeed. Well, it's good life adventure. I think mine's actually similar. In the Lucasfilm world, I wanted to talk about the fact that I finished Mandalorian Grogu season 3, and I'd seen the movie, and I just didn't know where to go with. And oddly enough, I went to Dial of Destiny and I watched that. And this is one of those things that, it's like I'm like working out or putting it on. And as I said before, recently, when I say I just put on a movie in the background, that's usually because it's something I love so much and I want it there. It's not just a casual viewing like it's on HBO on a Sunday morning. It's like I choose to have it there. And then I just went straight into Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. And you and I on our indie series, we went deep into that film. And look, if you're going to rank it, I might rank it the lowest. I get it. There's some things that just, do I need swinging monkeys in that sword fight? Not my favorite. Yeah, absolutely. But this is a goddamn Indiana Jones movie to its core. And I was mumbling to myself. I was in my garage gym and the movie was on. I just was mumbling. I was like, y'all miss the point. Y'all just, just like grumbling to myself, almost to the 2008 time frame where again for 2 or 3 things in the film that was just determined this sucks. And end of conversation. Well, we all have agreed that this thing's bad, right? No, we haven't agreed to that. We can agree to some things that don't stand up, but what this movie is saying, this movie says a lot. Go check out our Indiana Jones review in our series. It's one of my favorite things we've done here. But I was circling my. you and I always talk about shower conversations where you're yelling at someone in the shower. I was just in my gym, just kind of like y'all missed the point. So, but I enjoyed the film once more, and I'm an unabashed Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull fan.
That is great. I should rewatch it again soon because I really do like it as well.
Yeah. So that is the past, but now let's look to the future. Star Wars news. No, actually, we have to start with the big story this last week that is sad, and this was last Friday, right after our live show, I believe, not too long after we went live on Friday. The news came that Marcia Lucas passed away at 80. Here's a family statement from her family, I should say. Marcia will be remembered as a brilliant storyteller, a trailblazer for women in film, a loving mother and grandmother, a generous host, and a loyal friend whose humor and sparkle filled every room she entered. Her influence on film is indelible, but those who know her best will remember the way she made life feel more vivid, more beautiful, more fun, and more full of love. Lucasfilm put out a longer statement on their website that was great as well, so you guys can all check that out. So, Joseph, she's often referred to as a woman who, quote, saved Star Wars, and she's credited with some important changes to episode 4. The lore will let you know. This includes restructuring the first act, re-editing the Star Wars trench run, or even just like putting that all together. There's some great stuff from George. Like, this was pretty hard to do. Adding layers of small humanizing moments. The lore says that Chewie is screaming at the mouse droid was something she put in there, and of course the big one suggesting the death of Obi-Wan. And we also want to highlight, as we have, Jen Land, of course, has her Jedi Beat series a couple years ago, put out a great little mini doc that was actually a reworking of the audio version years prior of the Marcia Lucas effect. So please check that out. I'll make sure it's linked in on the back end of this episode. But let's just start here, Joseph, with this sad news, but what Marcia Lucas means to us as a Star Wars fan.
Yeah, I mean, I wish that I had had time to rewatch Jennifer's great distillation of her impact on Star Wars. I think she is obviously a huge part of Star Wars, and I think some of the things that I think about when I think about all of the tales of her contribution is just such a great lesson of how much editing is a part of the writing process. It's an easy thing to say of like, oh man, yeah, editing's a part of the writing process, but like how much is like you can take footage that was intended to be one thing and entirely change the emotional content of it. I think it is when I think of Marcia Lucas, I also think that she's one of the real touchstones to this balance between a person who has a big vision and the people who help the visionary execute that vision. And that list of collaborators can be long, from Ben Burtt to John Williams, all of the various designers. I think Marcia Lucas's help resonates in modern times because George can be a very thoughtful and analytical creator, as he himself will say. And I think everything that she brought to it is a lot about, well, what's the heart of this film? What's the emotion of this film? George, what are you really trying to say? And I know maybe you think it's clear because it's clear on the page, but are we feeling it in the film itself? So yeah, her combined just technical and creative prowess as an editor, with the fact that like they were partners, they were in a relationship, and I know it's like when I have a big picture idea and someone very, very close to me is like, hey, I know what you're trying to do. Let me ask you, do you think this is accomplishing it, or should we look closer? It's I do not in any way want to underestimate the value that she has simply as an editor for hire.
Right.
But I think it's also humans are complex and art is complex. And I think it does matter that they were in a
Mm,
partnership at that time that
mhm.
was beyond creative. It was personal.
Yeah, no, absolutely agree with that. And as far as what she means to just me as a Star Wars fan, she is truly part of the lore. And I'm not saying that in this like Star Wars lore snide remark, like, oh, stories. It's like Phil Tippett and Joe Johnston and Ben Burton, all these names we know, and she's has her place right there. And I love hearing the stories. And to me, it does represent, like you're saying, the creative process. I don't think it's incorrect to say she's the woman who saved Star Wars, but I also think it's way more complicated than that as well. And that just that she was valued, she was sought after, she had already, as you said, not only a relationship, kind of partnership, but worked on American Graffiti,
Hmm.
edited American Graffiti at THX 1138, and so for George to kind of have that realization of like I need to reach across to the other editing studio, pull her away from some of the stuff with Marty, Star Wars actor Marty Scorsese. Um, it speaks to her skills and her power. And yeah, what you talk about, yeah, you're right. It's so easy to say. I think we all learned that early on in our creative journeys. A movie is made in three sections: the writing, the shooting, directing, and the editing. You rewrite
Hmm.
every time. Yeah, that's also very true. And she was really damn good at that, and it shows. And that's absolutely her place is secure. But I did want to ask you too, if like, do you remember the first time like hearing about her work? Because this is all kind of connected to me, because there's some life complications that we know about and don't need to slide into if you're familiar with the story, that I didn't grow up knowing her name as much as the
Mm-mm.
others. And I think that's been
No.
corrected. But yeah.
Yeah. I think it probably first like a documentary in the late '80s or early '90s. Probably like, oh wow, cool.
Mm,
Um,
mhm,
I didn't
mhm.
know that about the editing. I didn't know. I'm trying to remember when I first learned about the Tusken Raider footage being rocked back and forth,
Rock.
and that blew my mind and has
Mm,
stuck with me for a long time. I thought about that a lot while editing my own film. Of like, just
mm,
always remember to like, what do you want? There's this bridge between what you have for footage and what you want, and it
mhm,
is
mhm.
a thrilling and frightening challenge to find those Tusken Raider moments. And I
Yeah.
think, I think I probably first heard about it in that, and I don't know the lore of which of the three, final editors um,
Right.
did that. But
Yeah.
all three of them were making those creative choices of, we know what we want this to be. How can we make it that with the footage that we have? So I probably heard
Mm,
about that in the late '80s, early '90s, and I probably heard more details like from like internet articles in the like mid to late '90s as the internet began to bloom. And I'll be very
yeah.
honest, it's there's one conversation you can have that is her prowess and importance as an editor. Period, but it's also just, to me, it is inextricably tied up with the fact that women were not as prominent in the industry then. They aren't as prominent in the industry now. And
Mhm.
even, creators that we know and love, like Lucas and Spielberg, benefited from another perspective, like the great tale of Marcia Lucas going, hey, what's the end of Marion's story? And the ending of Raiders of the
Right.
Lost Ark being so much better for Marion and Indy and the audience.
Right.
And for me, it is hard to separate the two because it's all true. She's a fantastic, talented editor, but she also lived and worked in a specific time in the
Yeah.
industry.
Yeah, no, I was trying to, I asked myself this question. I was like, it might be, I'm right with you. It's maybe not the first time I heard of her, but the late '80s, early '90s was that time where more information was coming in, and we were looking back on the pop culture that was so fresh just 5 to 10 years earlier.
Hmm.
It's weird to think we were around for the 10th anniversary of Star Wars. The old film released in the '70s. Um, and I think you want to talk about kind of unnoticed and internalized sexism in the patriarchal system. Like, I remember seeing pictures of her, because those classic. I think there's only like 50 pictures of the making of some of these films, right? We've
Hmm.
all seen George pointing at the half-built Death Star. There was one of those around the times, or even one of the docks in the '80s. I think there's a scene where George is talking about the Rancor slurping up the Gamorrean guard like a noodle, right? And they're all
Mm-hmm.
laughing, and she's in there. And I remember seeing some of the shots and admitting here like 10, 11, being like, "Oh, that's great." His wife hung out. You know,
Mm-hmm.
no one sat down and said, "Oh, no, she's an Oscar winning editor." And got the work of Richard Chew and Paul Hirsch on 77's Star Wars as well. But and I think that started to, and the whole story, and like I said, it's complicated. There's some human stories. There's a lot of things going on behind the scenes during that time, and the breakup of and the ending of the marriage. All that stuff is stuff not need to be brought up here, but it's part of that story. And so that her name wasn't as prominent, and it was around that time. You learn more than, and even it's with Jennifer first did that Jedi beat early on in the ForceCenter run.
Mm-hmm.
The video version came out just maybe 2 years ago. Please, again, watch on the channel. I think it's beautiful. She added some new stuff, but the first version, I think I was still kind of like, oh yeah, okay. There's little things I just hadn't learned, and I'm just trying to own that. The time that you and I were in, just as the time Marcia Lucas worked in.
Mm-hmm.
So it's interesting to track that journey for us.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, sorry.
No, go for it.
I love, what's funny is I stayed up too late and you probably woke up too early today. You and I are at the intersection of tired and frazzled. So,
Indeed, we are.
The final thing is just want to talk. I mean, we absolutely want to pay respect. Is absolutely a filmmaking legend. I mean, she's a legend in the industry, and her work on other Scorsese projects as well. Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore and Taxi Driver and stuff are renowned. But I just want to talk about her final legacy as we say goodbye to Marcia Lucas in Star Wars and in the industry. I think you touched upon a lot of it, but where do you go with that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it just, I think legacy, particularly with that first film, is stepping back and being able to see the big picture. Again, I've been thinking about this a lot with the film stuff that I've been working on. Is as you work on it, you want to make everything correct, which means you start spending so much time with each individual tree and you lose focus to step back and see the forest. And I think Lucas is a creator like that, where he's like, especially like some of the behind the scenes with Phantom Menace of like, he's in there like, hey Ben, let's throw in this other take of Rick Ollier in his shot he wasn't in, because I like it when he blinks twice, not once. Like, that's a man who's paying attention to the details. He is paying attention to the trees. And I think the story of Marcia Lucas is partially working on the trees with her editing of like, she's paying attention to the trees and the details and making shots work.
Yeah.
But I think she was also, in a position to step back and go, George, look at the forest. Is this whole thing flowing the way you want it to? Does it have the heart that you want it to have?
Yeah. No, well said. A bird's eye view of the forest of art that we're all stuck in sometimes. I think that's valuable. And for me, her legacy is a lot of things we've been talking about. She is a key, if not at times framed as the key to the success of Star Wars early on, at least in the version that we got on screen. But again, other people, Richard Chew and Paul Hirsch were nominated as well. And Hirsch went on to edit on Empire too, I believe, right? But that's her place. That's her place. It's just that the Star Wars is this collaborative effort, and she was a powerful voice in the room during a time, as you pointed out, that was maybe not allowed to be as much. And for every one of the changes she suggested, as the lore will build and build and build upon, I'm thankful for every one of them, because I think they were all right. And I think some of the stuff that she brought are things that not only I love, but I think the entire Star Wars fandom fell in love with in 77 and beyond. So it's also a stark reminder that time moves on, and we're starting to say goodbye to a lot of these names more and more. And it's certainly a reality of life, and certainly something even Star Wars teaches us to, let go and all those things. But it's a reminder of just how long this has been been around, this franchise, this story, and it continues to mean so much to us and newer generations of fans and new fans popping on. And a name like this, we want to make sure the name is heard going forward.
Absolutely. And I think final thing for me is I think the statement from her family was fantastic to call her a trailblazer. So I think her legacy will be tied to Star Wars, but also just as somebody who was in demand as an editor at that time, it was sought out, did a phenomenal job. I think trailblazer is great, and it's important for us to remember trailblazers so we can blaze new trails.
Indeed. Always glass ceilings to shatter still. So let's look for them and smash through them and help others smash them as well. So, Marcia Lucas, thank you for your contributions to Star Wars, not just the film, but the entire saga. Let's move on with a bit of a catch up. There's some big stories that popped up in the last couple of weeks. And, well, with the release of Mandalorian Grogu and just kind of our own ForceCenter schedule, we haven't had a chance to really sit down and talk about them as a podcast. So we're going to get to this first one here. And Damon Lindelof, he went on a podcast and talked about being fired from Star Wars. While on a Ringer podcast, or as I like to say, because I'm grumpy, on another goddamn Ringer podcast, Damon Lindelof shed some light on his time working with Lucasfilm on a Star Wars project. There's two big quotes making the rounds. I will take a sip of water and try to read the first one here.
I believe in you. You're going to have glitter in your tongue.
Know what I got to do? This is what I even got to do even more now. Here we go. ForceCenter's getting old.
Glasses for our podcast listeners.
Oh yeah,
put on the glasses.
You can hear these are big ASMR sounds I've discovered.
Oh, really? The clickety-click?
My sports card ASMR fans love that. All right, so Lindelof, again, this is a podcast, and I was not going to listen to the whole Ringer podcast. I got some issues with the Ringer. Anyways, here's his full quote. I was fired off of a Star Wars movie. They asked me, what do you think a, quote, Star Wars movie should be? And I said, here's what it should be. And they said, great, you're hired. And then 2 years later, I was fired. So I was wrong, at least through that prism. But what we were attempting to do, my partner, Justin Britt Gibson, Raina McClendon, and I attempting to do was to have this conversation in the movie, which is to say there is a force of nostalgia and there is a force of revision, and they are at odds with one another. And let's do the Protestant Reformation inside Star Wars. And it didn't work. You have your cake and eat it too. The conversation that the fandom is having, without winking and looking at the audience, that didn't feel necessarily that risky. All right, Joseph, what does that all mean?
Like you, I haven't got a chance to listen to the entire podcast for context, which I really like to do, because sometimes, like, how joking are they? How much is this relating back to it? Was Damon Lindelof talking about another project that he got fired from, or a project that went great right before us, and that, all that kind of stuff. Right. I'm not sure what your problem with Ringer is, so I'm excited to hear about that, just to acknowledge everything that's on the table.
I actually kind of overall enjoy the idea. It comes from Bill Simmons and his old website Grantland, and I like Simmons as a sports journalist. He was a very early on in the I like sports, but I also like making a Simpsons reference when talking about it. And I don't stand by everything Bill Simmons is or does or says, but I like the idea. So there's a little bit of professional jealousy. Why wasn't I asked to be on the Ringer? Why don't I host their Game of Thrones show? And two, I also think their shows aren't as deep as they think they are, but their audience really thinks they are. I got to be honest. There's some people in mine who are like, well, listen to the Ringer. I'm like, You've done it wrong. You've done it wrong. You've done it wrong. You think Andor is the only one that's political. Next podcast, please. But anyways, that's my own.
Got it. Okay, good.
Grumpy Tuesday at ForceCenter.
This is great context, though, because I didn't know it was a sports thing. This is going to change everything for me.
Anyway. It's to be clear, it's branched out. It's mostly pop culture now.
But that it started that way is good context. Anyway,
yes.
Point in terms of my analysis of what he's talking about, we can talk about it in more detail. I think about what he means by Protestant Reformation, but the big picture is, I think it sounds like he and his partners were trying to write a story that wanted to question the tenets of Star Wars while also doing Star Wars. I feel like that's what he means by having his cake in Eat It Too. And you and I have talked a ton over the years. I think the combination, the agreement and the stress between the new and the old is one of the most fundamental things in Star Wars. That the first film comes out and it is like nothing you've ever seen before, but it is based on the oldest stories of large parts of global culture. That it is a fresh-faced new kid, Luke Skywalker, a new hope, who is being guided in all of these old ways. So I feel like that tension is inherent to Star Wars. But it feels like they were trying to frame that tension in a different way and make it more about nostalgia versus shiny and new, which this might have been great. But my big picture is I feel like Star Wars is having those conversations. I feel like the entire sequel trilogy is wrestling with the effects of the past while trying to do something new. I think The Last Jedi is explicitly challenging all of the core ideas of Star Wars. Do we need to actually fight? How should we fight? Why do we fight? Why do we have these wars in the stars? Should we have these wars in the stars? Do the Jedi need to be here? If so, why? What should they do? And it challenges all those things and comes around to support them in the third act. And I think we can go on and on about the sequel trilogy, but for me, like, one of the defining indelible images is the end. Rey doesn't hold on to the old lightsabers. She buries them and makes a new lightsaber built of her life, her journey, her future. I also think, as we've talked about a lot recently, so I will shut up, the Mandoverse is all characters wrestling with, hey, we'd really like to try to move forward and make a better future, but there are a lot of mostly negative forces who do not want things to change from the recent kind of crappy status quo. Right. The one I think of always is the pirates who just like, this building can't be a school. It's got to be a bar. It's got to stay, and just across the board. Yeah, so it's intriguing because maybe they had a different spin on it, but it also feels a little like maybe underselling what's at work in a lot of modern Star Wars.
Yeah, exactly. Yes, we're right there. We're in the same spot. I by the way, I'm not one of those, I don't have an axe to grind with Damon Lindelof. He's talented in a way I will never be. I so respect what he did with the Watchmen series, teaching an entire generation of middle-class Gen X white people about the Tulsa Massacre. I mean, that's cited a lot in conversations.
And it's, as a fan of Watchmen from the day the first issue came out, it was fantastic, and it was playing around with these ideas. It was taking something that is kind of holy in the comic book sequential art graphic novel world and saying the original was great because it's daring, so I'm going to do something daring with it. The creator hates it, doesn't legally want it to happen, and I'm going to have the chutzpah, me and my team, to go, we're doing it anyway. I have I am not a Damon Lindelof hater at all. I really try not to be a hater of anybody, but I actually really think highly of him.
Yeah, no, that was part of the context for things I'm about to say. But like, I read that when this went around, and I just, not even like being snarky or jokey, I'm like, but he's talking about every single Star Wars thing I've ever watched. And the problem might be that, and no one in my life personally, but that kind of quote, the way it's framed or the way it was pulled out of the interview and sent into the news cycle, reeks of, Star Wars is just nostalgia. And this is something that we run into in every bar argument, every episode of Movie Fights I'm on, everything, this whole, it's a wash of nostalgia, where it's like you've said so well just today, but also in the past, like this, that's been what's baked into the DNA from the beginning. It is always about generational change, always about generational exchange. So when I read that, I was like, I mean, and I think he says in the first part of it, that they were like, great, you're hired. So there was something in his pitch that they were like, yes, that's what we do here. And if you're doing a series going forward, we'll talk maybe a little bit more of the details of it. But if we're going forward in the Star Wars story, what does that mean? What does that argument or that tension now feel like going forward? And I think, so I think, you have to pull that out too. They agreed as well. It wasn't like they rejected his premise. He goes on, we'll talk about stuff about maybe why he is not on the project anymore. So in terms of what does it all mean? I'm with you. This sounds wonderfully familiar. This sounds like, this is something I would want. What other people make of this quote is not his fault or or what the interview did. But I do want to go into a little more of the details of what you think he meant by doing the Protestant Reformation inside Star Wars. And Protestant Reformation, the Martin Luther, the split in the church, it's big. Look it up. There's probably a YouTube video on it there. But what did you take to mean of doing it inside of Star Wars?
I think speaking specifically about the Protestant Reformation, I think my opinion of what he might mean by that was informed by knowing that he's working on a post Rise of Skywalker film.
Right.
And I think that he perhaps made that explicit theological reference because maybe what he was dealing with was, okay, Rey is starting her new Jedi Order. Are they going to follow the old teachings, or is Rey gonna nail her 99 theses to the wall, or is Rey determined to follow the old ways? And does Finn,
It's Finn, yeah.
nail, or does a young upstart, Jedi in training,
Yeah.
split off?
Yeah.
And I think the thing for me of like that is a little bit different to me than some of the just classic new and old
Right.
discussions that go on in Star Wars, an examination, holding Star Wars up to the light and going, why does this work and how does it work? I'm extremely interested, and I know from all of our conversations with ForceCenter friends that that everybody's really interested in what could change about the Jedi Order, what should change about the Jedi Order. I'm really interested in that if it's character driven. I'm really interested in a story where Rey says, I get the idea of the Jedi about attachments is you are making a commitment. You are giving your whole life to this, and you have to really guard against fear of losing people. And she experienced that fear. And Rise of Skywalker is beautifully well told of. She's so desperate not to lose people, she keeps accidentally hurting people around her and fearing that is who she will become. But she also went on a journey to need connection. So I think it's embedded in the character. And if you wanted to wrestle with the character and wrestle with how does a character feel about attachment and what feels right, I'm so excited for that. My concern with a lot of the what should the new Jedi Order be? Should there be a Jedi Reformation? Is I personally, I can feel it when a writer gets in there and goes, this has always bugged me about Star Wars, so I'm going to fix it.
Right.
It happens, in my opinion, a lot in the novels from even writers that I love. And usually just a little detail. They'll just make something make sense. And you can and for me, it's like, I'm into this. I'm into the character. This is what Jyn Erso thinks. Yeah, I got ripped out because I suddenly feel the writer's hand going, I've had this conversation in the shower with myself. I've had this fight with other parents when I pick up my kids at school, and I'm going to make it right. This is why this happened. This is an incredibly subjective opinion for me, but I want to disappear into the fantasy world and stay connected with the characters. And I don't want to feel a push-pull of writers trying to fix what they personally perceive is broken in Star Wars.
Yes, and as we said up top, we're not saying that this was the case, but it has that potential to me. There's something about it that I'm aligning with you a lot on of this. I've been a fan for years, but here's this thing, right? And I like what you said about if it was coming from the character, because all that makes sense. You're right. Phone calls we've received on this show, on our ForceCenter Lives, or discussions, or in the comments in the Discord about going forward and what would the new Jedi Order, what will Rey do with the idea of attachment, and is there going to be would there have been a character in this Lindelof film named Marcia Lucas who is like, I want to date. Here's the thing on the wall,
one thesis. I'm gonna date.
I'm gonna date as a Jedi, and I'm intrigued by the idea if there was even within a new Jedi Order some sort of split, or there's another vein of Jedi. It could have been fascinating, but I agree with you from the character. And we're not saying that this wasn't what they weren't going to do in terms of the character driving it, but it just I think it was that line about having a conversation that the fandom is having. I don't know if everyone understands even that conversation. It reminds me, and not. I hope there's more Acolyte stories. There's there was some little blurb of an interview we'll have to catch up on of Leslie saying something about. Not that there was more stories to happen, but that people would want to hear them. We really like Leslie Headland and the Acolyte a lot, but I think there was a lot of what that series asked and maybe didn't get to finish that I'd be worried that it would have that vein of, again, not the Acolyte, but the reaction to the Acolyte, or some of the takeaways from the Acolyte are being, they're just a bunch of dumb cultist space cops, and stopping the conversation there. I'd be afraid of that kind of thing happening in a project like this. Just being honest on the gut reaction. Not saying that he would have done that or that they did try to do that. Lucasfilm said no. That's where I take reading this quote this is where my mind goes on this.
Yeah, and I think we're going to talk about the next quote, but he talks a little bit about trying to thread the needle in the scripting being hard, and I think that is hard. I think I want Star Wars to reflect the real world. I want it to reflect the anxieties and the questions and the things we're wrestling with in the real world. but I want to feel the emotion of that. If Rey and Finn and the new Jedi Padawan we've made up who wants to date um, are all pushing and pulling, that's great. But I don't ever want to feel like it's like, well, now I'm watching Rey and Finn have a fight in Facebook comments about what the Jedi should be,
Right. Right. They call him the horny Jedi. That's what he is.
Yeah.
And again, he seems to be speaking about the tension inside of all of Star Wars to me between the old and the new, but that is something that will probably be present going forward. And especially if you're going past the events of Rise of Skywalker, and there's been little things in Star Wars that have, including Lego specials, but if you're truly going past it, this is the big question. You and I have talked about the possible, Kinberg trilogy, and will that absorb the Rey film or whatever? But even I have looked at that Kinberg thing as, hey, this is something that's probably going to come in the 2030s, and people who aren't even born yet are going to be finding Star Wars with that trilogy. What do you want that to be and say? And the old will now be what was considered new here, so it's ongoing tension. And just, how should we handle that big question going forward?
Yeah, I have kind of two main thoughts, one about the new and one about the old. I think the new, I think audiences just need to feel a freshness, which is a challenge in anything that's 50 years old. And I think a challenge in something that also is always going to have a component of old thematically. But I just think we need new characters that we are forming new relationships with. I think we need new situations. I think we need, frankly, new action set pieces that feel like, wow, we haven't seen that before. I think we need new designs, just things that, frankly, just on the surface feel more fresh. And I think we have had some of those things in Star Wars. I think kind of the situation of Skeleton Crew felt really fresh to me. And I think the fact that, hey, that planet is isolated from the rest of the galaxy, so we kind of know some stuff, but it's totally open. We're just meeting these kids and going on that journey with them. The situation on their home planet was really different, isolated and new and mysterious. Of, is this good or bad? They're serving some great purpose, and they don't really know what it is. Like, great, new. For all the wonderful things that's been said about Andor, I think one of the great things about it is it just is a new tone. It is not new ideas to Star Wars. It's more nuanced, but they're baked into the beginning of Star Wars, but it's a new tone. I think the recent Maul show pushed farther in new incorporation of genres. I think a lot of the lightsaber fights in Maul pushed into sort of the new of, like, episode after episode is like, cool, I haven't seen that move or that angle of shot in a lightsaber fight before. Like, so I think Star Wars is doing it in lots of ways. And I think for the new, especially if it's the new trilogy, it's just really got to introduce the whole world to some new characters, some new designs, some new scenarios, and that'll be great for the new. And then I have some thoughts about the old, but I want to hear what you think about the new.
I love what you're saying about the new. I especially love that you brought up Skeleton Crew. This is something I look at it a lot as a potential blueprint for something going forward, which of course means I do want more Skeleton Crew related stories, but just how they did it. This familiar Star Wars galaxy to all of us, but the device of the Atten being blocked off, you could do different things, and it had obviously a very similar feel, and you had some X-wings, you had droids that you're familiar with, but it had a different kind of design, production design feel to it. It was unique to itself, and but yet I felt. And I remember going in, having maybe a little private trepidation about, what are we doing? What are we doing? And I'm in love with that series. And I would love taking that kind of series with a younger cast and building that on a almost like I even lost this round of movie fights, but I pitched like a 1 through 9, but like with this cast, and you follow it for years, and you have the old, you have the new. But it's a lot about what you're talking about. Like, I don't think whatever happens now, in this, again, we're talking about this alleged, not alleged, we know it's in the works, but like a possible Kinberg trilogy. Like, you don't have to necessarily do what Force Awakens did, which is full of very, very many new ideas, very, very big ideas and concepts about the pull and push of nostalgia and new. But you don't just have to have X-Wings and TIE Fighters, which is a critique I understand of that film. It doesn't keep me up at night. I did wonder where Y wings were, but we got them later on. But like you don't necessarily have to do that going forward because you're not necessarily speaking to that generation. So it's not surface things, but just how you build a story going forward, how it looks. I think you're right. New set pieces, everything. I could see that being a way to handle it and still have the big things we're familiar with.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think for me the old thing. Let's talk about old. Put your glasses on, Ken, and let's talk about old.
Dude, I'll read the next quote anyways. Okay.
I think that there is a lot in Star Wars that does wrestle with the sequel trilogy wrestles with what is good and bad about the past. Kylo wants to kill it, and he can't. It's always going to be a part of us. Rey is looking only back to the past for my parents will come back for me, and things will be the way they were when I was a young child. And Rey is the character who is able to balance the new and the old and find value in the past, but move toward her future. So I think there's a mix in how the old and the nostalgia is presented. There's negatives and there's positives. I think the Mandoverse is a lot of people trying to drag the galaxy back into the recent past of imperial and gangster control, and we shouldn't move on from that. But I think with Lindelof talking about let's mirror the conversation in the real world. I feel like the conversation in the real world is often coded is old and nostalgia are bad. They are literally conservative, and it is very, very true that in our current attempt at a total fascist takeover of America, it's classic. It's make America great again. Go back to an imaginary time when things were perfect, and actually that means go back to a time when there were no black people or women in the military. So lots and lots of reasons for people to code old and nostalgia and make X again as a bad thing. Within the story of Star Wars, one of the things that has spoken to me since I was 4 years old and only continued to speak to me, and it's there in lots of Star Wars, but particularly in the original trilogy, old can also be a sense of connection, in a sense of belonging, in a sense of continuity with the past, not a being shackled to it and you must do things exactly as they were done in the past. Even in the original trilogy, Luke's goal is the hero's goal is the kind of conservative, let's bring back the Republic. Let's bring back the Jedi. Even in his doing it, he connects with his father in a way that Yoda and Obi-Wan didn't expect. But he does something new. But the original Star Wars to me is Luke is this young guy who feels like maybe there's something more in the world, and he's got his aunt and uncle who just want him to keep his nose to the ground and do things the way you're supposed to, harumph. And then here comes this old man of the past, Obi-Wan Kenobi, and says, these stirrings you feel are ancient. There is a connection between you and the past, between you and the present, between you and the future, between you and the universe. This stuff is real and it's baked into your bones. And that idea became more powerful to me as I discovered I was pretty good at drawing when I was a kid, and then discovered my dad was really good at drawing, and then discovered his dad was really good at drawing. And I took a trip. I was not interested in my Scandinavian culture at all because it was just a joke in many places when I was growing up. It was being Scandinavian. It was just like, oh, you're the dumb character on a sitcom. Cool. So I wasn't super interested, and I wanted to be more interested. And recently took a trip to Norway, where a lot of my ancestors come from, and felt this like deep awakening of not being alone, seeing some of the art that my ancestors did and what they were interested in and cared about, and how it was similar to me and similar to the struggles. So I really, really, really understand the danger of nostalgia in how it can be coded as conservatism. But I argue that in the original trilogy, it is coded as connection. And apologies for the long monologue, but I think that Star Wars should be looking not at the negativity of nostalgia, but that wonderful, warm feeling of truth you get when you connect with your ancestors and you feel like you are from a long line of something, and it gives you
Mhm.
strength and purpose and connection.
Oh, beautiful words. Well said. And absolutely. I think, what is there? And, how many times have we had to point out that Kylo's the bad guy in Last Jedi, and that wasn't the point of the film to destroy the past. No, I absolutely love what you're saying. Though I do reject the idea that you think the 1950s weren't the perfect idyllic white picket fence decade. It was a perfect decade. No redlining, no segregation laws, no religious dogma being stuffed down the throats of a nation. Not at all. I reject your idea there. No. Yeah, yeah. No, absolutely well said. And I'm just trying to think of all the discussions and debates and just thoughts I've heard about that word nostalgia. There is a danger to it. Absolutely. It can be a trap. Absolutely can be a trap. But I've always said that, or thought and believed in Star Wars is not just simply dealing with that. And an ATSD showing up where an ATSD should be is not Gen X nostalgia blow. No, it is. That's just the decoration. What is it saying about the past? What is it saying about going forward? And yeah, it's all there. So anyways, beautiful. Well said. Nothing more to add on.
Okay.
All right, but let me put on my
Put on
Chuck
the old
Schumer's.
glasses.
Chuck Schumer's going to write a stern letter about your 1950s talk. All right. Lindelof said this. Again, he just gave this big quote we just been discussing for a few minutes where they liked his idea. And then I guess I was wrong because they fired me. Then he says, well, I may have been fired not just because they seemed to like the premise. The writing was really hard. It was slow, like the tone, getting it right, where it was inside of the canon. What is its relationship? What its relationship was to Episode 9? Is it starting a new trilogy? Is it like all those things? They're so massive. They're so big. It's sort of a tanker equation, which is you turn the wheel and it takes 5 minutes before it turns a little bit like this. When Episode 7 came out, we all knew what it was, Rey, and it was Finn, and it was Poe, and then we were migrating back in. And Luke and Leia and Han and Chewie and all those guys. But we got that sense that when this new trilogy was over, we're going to be launching with these new characters, and that was the center of Star Wars. And the new question is, are Mando and Grogu the center of Star Wars? It's really hard to read a quote that's really just someone blabbing on a podcast. I just want to point out. It's not a statement.
It's not a press release. It's not the ums and ahs and yeahs and ellipses and yeah.
If you notice, I was trying to edit what I think his hand would have been doing during this. All right, so that's a lot and we could dive into that, and you might have more to say on that, of course. But the general question, Joseph, I'm going to pull that is, all right, who is the center of the Star Wars universe now, and who do you want it to be? Who could it still be? But pull apart that quote.
Yeah, I think the center of Star Wars is wonky right now. I think it kind of was. I think for a while there, like Rise of Skywalker comes out, and in general, people are not fans. Many of us love it. In Mando, and at the time, the child, Baby Yoda, blow up. And Mando and Grogu, I think, did become the face of Star Wars for a long time, and Ahsoka as well. So and I think you see that from my perspective, the action figures they're putting out, like you get Luke and Vader and a Stormtrooper, and Mando and Grogu and Ahsoka, and these are the faces of Star Wars right now. I think Mando and Grogu, I mean, obviously their movie is still out right now. And a lot of people loved it. I know it is not, it is doing fine at the box office. It is not crushing. It is performing like other storied genre franchises right now. So I feel like, but I don't know if they're the center, because I feel like their stars have diminished a little bit. But at the same time, they're going to be omnipresent. I don't think children are going to stop wearing Grogu clothing for the next 15 years. So Grogu's, in terms of like the way like we're growing up, and like 3PO and Vader in the 80s are like, you can't leave your house without seeing them somewhere. They're the face of Star Wars, a weird cutout mask of Mark Hamill's face is the face of Star Wars. Literally. I think Grogu will continue to be that. But narratively, I don't know.
I agree with you based on, we love Rise of Skywalker, but it also just kind of wrapped things up anyways, right? It's the end of the Skywalker saga, whatever you'd say. It's the same thing that we had in 83. of everyone's dancing and celebrating the big victory. So even if you go on, even if George did 7, 8, 9 in 1991, which in retrospect, I'm glad he didn't. I just don't think that would have looked as good as we wanted. You would have had to have a new core. I agree with you on the Mandalorian and Grogu thing. I think that the center of the Star Wars universe in terms of marketing, the numbers on the merch sales are still very high. That was something I was reading about last week. Regardless of what the film is or ends up doing, and the more I think about it, the more I love it. But and I quite frankly see a lot of positive, like, what was the problem with that vibes? Like people going, had a great time. But a franchise that's 50 years old and 12 or 13 films into its run is not going to, I think, for a lot of factors that we just don't have time to go into, it's not going to do what you think it is. So I don't, and just story wise, the way it's gone, I don't think Mandalorian and Grogu can be the center of the universe going forward. It seems like they're best enjoyed when they're off doing their thing. And I think they will tie into a little bit more of what's going on in that era, and I do hope there's more stories with them, but it doesn't have the same energy to me as the new Young Jedi. And yes, I know what Grogu could be, but it just doesn't track to me. Doesn't seem like it would play out the same way as if you were to do a 10, 11, and 12. You'd have to have a new core. And there's the thing too. I think if Rey, Poe, and Finn, and let's say all the actors agree to come back, which I think is possible but not probable, based on just some of the things out there that I've heard, have seen, and felt. But you would have to do the same thing too. I think you'd have to find the new center for whatever is going forward, and I don't think those characters, they would immediately become the older generation. They'd have to be.
Yeah, and
I don't know.
Yeah, and that's really interesting to me, because they're all quite young, really.
Yes. Yeah.
To be like, well, we're the old mentors, whittling by the shed, well, you young kids. But I do think whatever Kinberg's trilogy does need a core of new characters with open-ended futures that are the center of Star Wars. And I think maybe a lot of what Lindelof is talking about is the continuing shift of what is this post Rise of Skywalker film? Is it a one-off film focusing on Rey as a character?
Yeah.
Is it the start of a new trilogy? Is it just a new trilogy, or is it a Skywalker trilogy? All that stuff.
Yeah, and a final question coming on that, but even just on this quote, again, we're pulling from a podcast, and these quotes are going around. I think this is a little bit more of the truth in the situation, where he's saying it's really hard, and I think we've learned some of the Star Wars projects, as loud as they were announced, you're going to run into some folks who get into it and are like, yeah, this is a hard thing to do. You and I are both friends with some of the same people, or different circles of people who have written Star Wars books, comics, animated shows, and they'll all tell you this too. They'll tell you it's really hard, not restrictive, but it's really hard because you don't want to step on and trample on things already established. You don't want to piss anyone off doing that. Or you do something here and someone says, you can't do that. We can't touch that character or that part of time. And then I've had some folks said, I can't believe what I got away with. And that's just hard on its own. And I think it's even more difficult, not diminishing any other medium, but when you put it in a movie theater and it's in front, it's the face of the franchise going forward. Yeah, that tanker analogy makes a ton of sense to me. And it just, yeah, it's hard.
Yeah, no, I really, really agree with that. And also, like, I just think this will shock people listening or watching this podcast. I think Star Wars films are more complex than people give them credit for. If you look at the dialogue on the page, the characters don't actually get to say much, and you have to pack so much meaning into what they say, while also moving big picture stories forward and keeping a certain clip of action. Even without all the canon stuff, Star Wars has carved out kind of a difficult a challenge for itself, which is, I think, why we keep seeing writers write lots and lots of different drafts, and all that,
Yeah, we're not perfect in nail. And let's not forget, our beloved Andor, a show you and I both love, still had to answer to an animated series. It still had to find some way, even though it danced around some of the things, and I think did it well, and things that make sense and I accept, it still had to answer to that. So it's difficult. Rounding the corner to the end of this conversation, It's hard to trace the Lindelof project. It's hard to trace. This project might have been part of the DNA of the announced Rey Skywalker led project. What I mean for that is just the stories over the years, and this was a scoop at one point. Lindelof and Justin Britt Gibson are working on this, and it's Helen Mirren's in it. Is old like all these things. It's just the Star Wars scoop world, and then we lead to an announcement at Star Wars Celebration 2023. Sharmina Obaid-Chinoy directing a Rey-led, for lack of a better description, new Jedi Order film. So it's hard to trace, but I don't think it's difficult to think that this could have something to do with it or might affect everything going forward. What does this mean for the project, that Rey film going forward to you? We don't know the answer. We don't know the answer.
Yeah. Total speculation, but like maybe there was like, okay, we need to build back up to a trilogy, but we have room here to give, before we just move Rey into the mentor position, we have room to give her a film and show her in her prime. And then she can move into the mentor role in this trilogy. Maybe that was a plan with Sharmina Obaid-Chinoy of like, we're working on this Lindelof film that might be a trilogy, but so random, probably incorrect speculation about that back in the day.
Yeah, no, and I still, even earlier said, what I was saying about the, Rey, Finn, and Poe can't be the center going forward in larger stories that take us generations ahead into Star Wars. But I would have taken The Adventures of Luke in 1989. All right, I would have taken that. Again, I think it would have looked not as good as you wanted it to be based on the technology at the time. But yeah, I dare I say the word one-off, but just Rey in her prime and this, and then going forward, we can build some stuff. I'd be absolutely intrigued. I'm still intrigued by that being the case. But yeah, it just also speaks, trying to trace the origins of this Rey film story. I think this is part of it, and tracing that crazy scoop world. And it just means to me that that shows how difficult it still is to try to go forward. And how I think I'm glad, without knowing details, I'm glad that they're not afraid to say, let's get it right. And that's not working. No matter what your name is, no matter what cred you bring, and no matter what great work you've done, it's not working. We got to go. And that's what I was starting to say earlier about some of the other projects announced not working. Even super talented folks. I'm still okay with that, even though I do have some frustration about, hey, just get something done, or make sure, I've shared that frustration people have out there of like, hey, this happens a lot because it's a franchise under the microscope. I'm sure this is happening in every other studio and every other franchise. We don't hear about the people taking Marvel meetings. It's a different house over there, and maybe they control it a little bit better, to be honest. I don't know, but yeah, I think about this Rey Skywalker led project a lot, and how I hope they get it right. And maybe that's a very, very difficult thing to do right now.
Yeah. And I think for me, it's I still would love the Rey film as briefly described by Lucasfilm and Sharmina Obaid-Chinoy and Daisy Ridley back in what far off year 2023. 2023, 3 years ago. Because a part of me is just thrilled because, as we've talked about, the trilogies are coming of age stories, and yeah, there is a part of me that like, wouldn't it have been great to have a one-off movie about Luke in 1989? It might have been pretty cool to have a one-off Vader movie in 2009, and like we told their coming of age stories. Now let's just see them in their prime. It'd be fantastic to just have a one-off Rey movie, because I think my tension with all this is that Simon Kinberg trilogy sounds like it's still on the books, and I have to imagine that trilogy is Filoni and Lin-Manuel Brennan's number one priority, because I think they feel like, hey, we're going to have Starfighter as a one-off for the 50th, and then we really need a solid new direction, and it feels like it's the trilogy. Great.
Yeah.
I think you need new characters. Yeah. But I would also like to see Rey, Finn, and Poe, and after all this talk, I would like Rey, but then as soon as you have a new generation that we got to meet, then, what are we doing with Rey, Finn, and Poe? Are they at a mentor level like Obi-Wan was in A New Hope, which was really like, hey, kid, here's some wisdom. Bye. Not a character. A character, but not a character arc, right? Yeah. And then the sequel trilogy did a lot of work to balance the old generation and the new generation have character arcs. So is Rey both a mentor and a main character like Luke in The Last Jedi? You get into a lot of these balancing acts. And then you get
Yeah.
into the whole, like, if it's a Skywalker trilogy, what does that mean and all that, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But we'll have
Yeah.
plenty of time to talk about that.
Plenty of time, indeed. Well, there you go. There's our look at the podcast that went on through the Star Wars news cycle for a while. But happy to discuss it. I think some great stuff to pull out of that one there. Our final story of the day is catching up to something, again, that was back in mid-May, and that is Ahsoka Season 2 is arriving in early 2027. Rosario Dawson announced this at the Disney upfronts, saying the second season of Ahsoka will arrive again, in quote, early 2027. Last we had heard was maybe 2026. But again, nothing was official, to my knowledge. Just kind of something that made sense. So what is our gut reaction to the news of the announcement of, hey, it's coming. It's just coming here.
Yeah, I mean, I think if they, I want them to put it out when they're ready to put it out. So if it takes more time, that's great. I was excited for fall of 2026 because I really want to see the next season. And it's also been, that was 2023 as well, right? Because that was the writers and actors strike. So that was 3 years ago, which is a ridiculous time to wait for a second season of a television show, as more people have been talking about lately. I also wonder if it's going to, and probably not, but 2027 is getting to be crowded. You know, we're going to have the re-release of, you know, original-ish cut of Star Wars. We have the new film, Star Wars Celebration, I think will come with many announcements of the future. I'm really hoping that season 2 of Maul, that's been in the pipeline and will be ready. There'll probably be something special for May 4th. 2027 might get a little crowded, and I definitely, the farther we get away from it, I really, really didn't like it when they were releasing Bad Batch at the same time as other live action shows.
Right. Great.
I think it really doesn't give each show its due and contributes to that. It's not special anymore because there's 8 of these coming out, and I know other people really disagree with that, and who listen, and I respect that. It's just my take.
Yeah. No. Yeah. As far as look, 2027 is going to be packed. It's the 50th year. That's exciting. I think a lot of podcasts are looking to that year and going, oh, we'll have things to talk about. And yeah, we've been around 12 years. There's a lot of times we have to look around and be like, all right, what are we going to discuss? I know, by the way, Visions, the series is coming later this year. Not talking over that. That'll be something we will enjoy, I'm sure. But it does kind of leave 2026 as a warm up for the big party next year. I think, and I'm excited about that. But also, I think there are reasons that were touched upon, and I didn't pull some of those quotes that are floating out there about just, seems like, I don't know, VFX stuff or just getting it right or whatever it might be. I'm always good with that. I have to be honest, and though, just on the calendar being released 4 years after, essentially 3 full years, but 2023 to 2027, that's not new. It's not just specific to Star Wars or Ahsoka or Disney Plus. House of the Dragon season 3's coming out at the end of this month, and I was reading an article about it, and they were like, season 4 is coming in 2028. I'm like, what? I don't know why. I don't know how. I don't have the books in front of me. I don't know the budgets, but get this bleep done. So that's part of my frustration too. But excited for the series too. Rosario said this: it's truly special seeing all the love from fans out there for Ahsoka and her crew. I can tell you this season, the battles are bigger and the stakes are higher. We cannot wait for you to see. Though the audience got a little preview of footage, which showed, quote, epic space battles and thrilling lightsaber combat. Well, there you go. That's a Star Wars thing. In closing here, and go where you want to go. But what now are your expectations going for season 2 with epic space battles and lightsaber combat coming your way?
Yeah, there's so many threads that I'm excited about, and I'm glad I don't need to know a ton, as we've talked about. But I'm glad that they clarified it isn't just Ahsoka's story; it's the whole era, and we'll be following, the Thrawn shenanigans. So I'm really excited to see the story of Ahsoka and Sabine and Baylan and Hadi on Shin Hati and the potential Mortis shenanigans that were teased. Very excited for that. Very excited for the stated Thrawn versus Akbar. I'm in some ways maybe most excited to spend some time with Ezra and see kind of like how does he fit into this era as a kind of fully formed Jedi in his own right. Luke's like, great, because I just want to meditate and study plants and build huts.
Yeah.
you go gallivanting across the galaxy there, Ezra. My biggest question about all of this for season 2, Ken, is going back to that announcement of 3 films in 2023: the Rey film, the Big James Mangold, beginning Dawn of the Jedi, and Dave Filoni doing his big New Republic versus Thrawn, big, sort of Avengers Endgame climax of the Mandoverse is the way that many fans interpreted it. But I think the way Lucasfilm always described it is the showdown between the New Republic versus Thrawn. And Filoni talked about this sort of the respect for heir to the Empire. So I'm very, very curious to see if Ahsoka season 2 is the first battle against New Republic versus Thrawn, and it kind of ends with, and now we're at war again. Or if plans have changed, and by the end of Ahsoka season 2, Thrawn has been defeated, and Ahsoka's in Mortis, or wherever this chapter of her adventure concludes, or if it's like, and to be continued for Ahsoka season 3, or to be continued in our big crossover Disney Plus show, or surprise, we actually are going to make that Dave Filoni movie, and it's going to come out in 2033. I'm not thrilled that that's what I'm focused on, but honestly, it is a little bit what I'm focused on, of what is the scope of the story we're being told in Ahsoka season 2.
Yep. There's that thing you just said about, does it end with, Bilbo going, my God, what have we done? Thrawn's now fighting the Republic. That's intriguing. That's intriguing to me. Of like, if Filoni's movie was still going to hit the screens, I think if we were in the predictive markets, aka betting, I wouldn't put money down on the film happening, simply because Ahsoka comes out in 2023. The film is announced in 2023, and then along the way, it seems as though, and I'm sure Dave wrote the scripts before. I'm sure all the ideas were placed to a certain degree. But I'm totally speculating, totally having fun podcast banter here, of just like at some point them going, Dave, you might have a bigger office in the future, and maybe you have to angle towards that. I know you can look at James Gunn and Superman and stuff like that, but so it's not like impossible that he couldn't write and direct this movie, but that, hey, maybe some of the things you want to do might show up here, because I think it was after, not that news of obviously Dave and Lin-Manuel Brennan getting the big jobs, but like along the way, there started to be that shift of, Akbar versus Thrawn. The first time I heard that news, I was like, wouldn't that be the movie? Like, wouldn't that sounds very final. Everything about that sounds final. So I don't know. And I'm intrigued. If it's 8 episodes of just, wow, this is truly stakes being higher, the galaxy's at stake, Thrawn's, I'm excited. I am really excited to see you. I love that you described it as Mortis shenanigans. That should just be a file on a desk. The Mortis shenanigans. I am perhaps most intrigued about that. I am most intrigued about Rory McCann taking over Baylan Skoll, unfortunately, because of the passing of Ray Stevenson, and picking up from looking out off the statue. And where do we go from here? That's one of the biggest question marks I have, and I'm excited to explore that. So, in a weird way, frustration of this coming out in 2027 aside, this announcement, this quote, and just kind of pulling the stuff together like we have here, is maybe really, really excited for season 2, and maybe place some big expectations on the story they're going to get to.
Me too. I'm very, very intrigued with where all of the characters and all the threads were left. We haven't even talked about Night Sisters. Yeah, is Thrawn going to be like attacking the Republic with like, these aren't just Star Destroyers, these are enchanted Star Destroyers. And
what are we going to do with the Noddy? The Nodi. I always say the Noddy. Nodi.
The Noddy and the Hottie out there alone.
Hottie out there on another planet with a Mortis shenanigans. I want Ezra to be like, wait, do we need I got some people that can help us form a new community. I'm going to go back and get the turtle folk. So a lot there.
Yeah, a lot.
All right. Well, we got some of the big stories. We played catch up. We did it. And, of course, paid our respects and said goodbye to Marcia Lucas. So a lot to discuss here on this news episode. If you got any more to add, thoughts, comment down below if we're watching YouTube, or reach out, let us know, or continue the conversation in Discord. You can find us on social media at ForceCenter Pod. Facebook page is ForceCenter Podcast if you're still over there. We're available as a podcast on a lot of spots. So check out iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and more. Every Sunday we re-release audio only our series Data Bank Brawl. Merch, which the Noti would have been. They're not fighters, but they would have been great in that series. Yeah. We have merch at TeePublic or at Fourth Wall. Like I said, you can support us and help us reach our goals at patreon.com/ForceCenter. Follow me at Napzok or my website, Napzok.com. Come hang out with us on the Blathering Live, Casterly Talk, or if you do like weird ASMR sounds, check out Sports Card ASMR. Joseph, where do you go and where do you relax and how?
Sorry, I got so calm when you were playing with your glasses that I almost fell asleep. Yes, you can check out my YouTube page for all of the very short films I've been working on finishing up another one this week, and more news coming very, very soon about the horror film I made with a bunch of great folks that is called Dead Media. And be sure to follow me on the various social medias at Joseph Scrimshaw for info on that.
There you go. All right, that is it. We'll see you next time here